All right, guys, so I'm going to open the model of the heart to expose the chambers of the heart where the blood flows through. So I'm going to open it right now. The interior of the heart is actually very, very beautiful, and it has four chambers. So before I show you the chambers, I'd like to remind you of some of these structures that you can see here, some of these niggers. You can see here the red and blue niggers. All right, so this particular guy here is called the superior vena cava. And close to the superior vena cava is the aorta. So this is the aorta. And then close to the aorta is the pulmonary artery, the main pulmonary artery. So this pulmonary artery divides into the left pulmonary artery and the right pulmonary artery. So you have the superior vena cava, you have the aorta, then you have the pulmonary artery that divides into the left pulmonary artery and the left and the right pulmonary artery. Now, below the superior vena cava, you also have another vena cava here known as the inferior vena cava. So this is the superior vena cava, then this is the inferior vena cava. Now, at the sides of the heart, you have the pulmonary veins. So you know this is the pulmonary artery, then these are the pulmonary veins. So these are the pulmonary veins right here, so pulmonary veins. All right, then finally, you have the apex of the heart. So the apex of the heart is always pointing towards the left side of the heart. So with this apex pointing towards this area, we now know this is the left side of the heart, then this is the right side of the heart. So there are four chambers within the heart. You have the right atrium right here, and then this below the right atrium, you have the right ventricle. So this is the right atrium, and this is the right ventricle. So at the left side, you have the left atrium, and below the left atrium, you have the left ventricle. So once again, you have the right atrium here, you have the right ventricle, you have the left atrium, and then this is the left ventricle. So there are two kinds of blood that comes into the heart. You have deoxygenated blood and oxygenated blood. The oxygenated blood is a blood that has been used by the body and now contains more carbon dioxide than oxygen. So this blood needs to go to the lungs to obtain oxygen. Then oxygenated blood is the blood that returns from the lungs. So this blood has a lot of oxygen and needs to go to the cells and tissues of the body to supply this oxygen to them. So let's start with how the oxygenated blood comes into the heart. So this deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body, like your head, your neck, your upper limbs, and the upper part of your thorax or your chest, will come to the right atrium through this ligament, superior vena cava. So superior vena cava brings the blood from the upper part of the body into the right atrium. And then blood from the lower parts of the body, like your legs, your abdomen, your pelvis, and even the lower part of your chest, will come into the right atrium through the inferior vena cava. So the inferior vena cava brings blood from the lower part of the body into the right atrium, while the superior vena cava brings blood from the upper part of the body into the right atrium. Then blood from the heart tissues itself, because the heart also makes use of this blood, will come into the right atrium through this vein here, this nigger here, known as coronary sinus. So it receives blood from the various coronary veins. So all the coronary veins drain into the coronary sinus, and this coronary sinus takes the blood into the right atrium right here. So when the right atrium receives this blood from superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and coronary sinus, it contracts and pumps the blood down to the right ventricle. So between the right atrium and the right ventricle, you actually have the tricuspid valve, which is absent right here. It's not in this model. So the tricuspid valve prevents backflow of blood from the right ventricle to the right atrium. So once the blood gets to the right ventricle, the target of this blood is to go to the lungs and get oxygen. The blood is deoxygenated. So the right ventricle will contract and pump this blood to the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary artery is the blood vessel that takes this blood to the lungs. So within the pulmonary artery, you have the pulmonary semilunar valve. And the function of this valve is to prevent backflow of this blood that's entered the pulmonary artery to the right ventricle. So this valve prevents the blood from flowing back to the right ventricle. So the pulmonary artery branches, you have two lungs. So the pulmonary artery will have to branch into right and left branches that will take them to the right and left lungs respectively. So the pulmonary artery gives rise to left pulmonary artery and right pulmonary artery. So the left pulmonary artery takes the blood to the left lung, while the right pulmonary artery takes the blood to the left lung. Within the lungs, there will be exchange of gases. So carbon dioxide will leave the blood to the lungs, while oxygen will leave the lungs into the blood. So the blood now becomes oxygenated blood, and then we have to come back to the heart. So to bring back the blood to the heart, you have the pulmonary veins. So these veins are carrying oxygenated blood. They are the only veins that carries oxygenated blood. So you also have the right pulmonary veins here that will take the blood from the right lung to the left atrium. Then the left pulmonary veins will take the blood from the left lung to the left atrium. So once the blood enters the left atrium will contract and pump the blood down to the left ventricle. And then between the left atrium and the left ventricle, you have the bicuspid valve, the left atrioventricular valve, or the mitral valve. And the function of this valve is to prevent backflow of this blood to the left atrium once it has entered the left ventricle. Thereafter, the left ventricle will contract and pump this blood to the aorta. So this is where the aorta connects to the left ventricle. So this is where it connects. And right here you have the aortic valve, aortic semilunar valve that will prevent this blood from returning back to the left ventricle once it has entered the aorta. So the aorta is the largest artery in the body, and its function is to take this blood to other arteries in the body that will take them to their respective organs. So the aorta will give rise to coronary arteries that will take the blood to the coronary artery that will take it to the heart. It will take the blood to renal arteries that will take the blood to the kidneys. It will give the blood to gastric arteries that will take them to the stomach. It will take the blood to hepatic arteries that will take it to the liver and so forth. So once the blood gets to all these organs, the organs will make use of this blood, and the blood will now becomes deoxygenated, and then will have to come back to the heart through the initial pathway that I described. And this is how the cycle continues. So guys, I hope you learned something from that video, and if you do, please give me a thumbs up by clicking on the like icon on your screen. And if this is the kind of content you want to watch, feel free to subscribe to this channel.